Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove and I'm joined by a man with a bulging contact list. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. I guess I think we share a contact list, though, don't we?
We do, but you've been working it.
That's true. That's true.
Especially, because I've been taking days off for health reasons here and there.
Again, I love when you phrase it as though it's vacation.
It's not the ideal vacation.
Not quite so much.
But you do use our contact list to contact your Rolodex of experts when you want to talk about stuff.
My friends and your acquaintances, yes.
My friends and your acquaintances. Which is to set up today's show. We are talking Women's World Cup, Italy, China, Netherlands, Japan later on. But first, we have an interview. Taylor Rockwell talking to Felipe Cardenas about Copa America 2019.
That is true.
Yeah.
The group stage is complete, so we look at the knockout round matches, who maybe Felipe thinks will go through, or generally more so like who he thinks will do well in the games, what he expects for those. But we also begin by talking El Tri, what they've done so far in the Gold Cup.
Copa de Oro.
The 3-2 win over Martinique is where we begin, but we get into sort of Tata Martino's relationship with the media, the Mexican media, which is
you talk Raul Jimenez?
We do very briefly because Tata Martino has been talking about Raul Jimenez.
Has he? Has he been saying good things about him?
Yes, good things at a time when there have been some negative things said about him. So
I'm just going to put this out there. Best striker named Raul of all time.
I think that's probably not true. It took me a minute to list the 8 other strikers who I think I'd probably go ahead of him. And then with the Copa America, we talk a little bit about
you, Copa America.
I try. I try to drop that A if I can. So we talk about knockout round. We talk a little bit about the group stage and kind of what's happened there. And then also maybe just some just general anecdotes from the tournament so far. Because
anecdotes, all right.
Felipe is reading all things, connected to all things.
Do we need to establish Felipe's credentials, or do you think our listeners already know who Felipe is from his previous appearances?
I mean, if they don't, they should know that he covers, I think currently is covering El Tri and Copa America and Atlanta United for The Athletic.
What a beat. That's a great beat.
He's got many hats. Many hats.
I would love that beat.
I think all of which he is not encouraged to wear while covering those teams.
Oh, yeah,
so there you go.
Press box rules, press box rules.
Yes.
All right, so maybe enough from me and you and more of you and Felipe.
With me, once again, I've got Felipe Cardenas. Felipe, thank you very much for taking the time. I know it's been a busy couple of weeks, so I appreciate it.
Anytime, Taylor. Anytime. Happy to be here.
So we talked last time about Copa America, the first round of the group stage. We're going to talk a little bit about the knockout round, the teams that have made it, the teams that have not made it. But I wanted to start off with the Gold Cup because you've been covering El Tri so far. Heads were turned when Martinique finished 3-2. It sounds like that scoreline maybe doesn't tell the full story. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think even during the first half, I sent a tweet saying, Mexico is in complete control of this game, despite the fact that Martinique was very well prepared. The day before, their manager Mario Bocali was very transparent in that he knew that it was one of their possibly their toughest game. I don't want to say ever, but they knew that the opponent that they were facing, but they were very prepared tactically, and he talked about that. He talked about the work that the team was putting in before that. Leading up to that game, even in the other group matches. The fact that in the first game they were a bit tired. They had just arrived to the Gold Cup. Guys coming in kind of late. They played Canada, and he wasn't satisfied with that result. They played much better, obviously, against Cuba, and then against Canada, they just looked really sharp tactically. They're very disciplined. They were dangerous when they got forward. They didn't get forward a lot, but when they did, they earned some fouls around the box. That's where that free kick goal came through, and it was a spectacular free kick, well taken. So I think what the narrative that came out of that matchup was that a team like Mexico, a CONCACAF king, struggled against a team from Martinique that isn't even recognized by FIFA, has five professionals on the roster. And when those questions started to come in, from the Mexican media, Mexican press to Tata Martino, he immediately deflected that type of narrative, and he came into the press conference very agitated with his team's performance, and not the overall performance, but what he said were defensive distractions. But he was quick to say that he was happy with the team, with the way the team approached the match. It wasn't that they took a day off or they didn't respect the opponent. that it was a match that should have finished 4-5-1. And if you look at the stats, he's correct. They had over 70% of the possession. I think 25 total shots. It just wasn't going in. And so, yeah, I think they to me, even though it was a close scoreline, and he rotated the squad as well. They were really never in trouble. And I think that is the story of the group stage for Mexico. They were really never in trouble in any match. They were tested a bit, against Canada, which I think everyone expected to get, for Canada to give them a bit of a game in Denver. But overall, Mexico has been cruising through this group stage, playing with a young team. I think a lot of people were wondering what this team would look like without Carlos Vela, without Hector Herrera, without Chicharito. And they've been fine. Tata has been able to rest players, even though he had a bit of some injury scares early. He has a deep squad, and I think there are players that maybe were off the radar that are starting to come up, like Uriel Antuna, a guy that plays for the Los Angeles Galaxy, on loan to the Galaxy from Manchester City. So I think that he has some talent, but he's really embraced the competition and taken on his role very well.
As always, Felipe, you anticipate questions well, because my next question was about Uriel Antuna. He was, I believe, only included in the squad after an injury to Jorge Sanchez. Now he's lighting it up. What explains his ability to turn it on? Is it the competition in camp? Is it that maybe he's just been undervalued so far?
I think it's a little bit of both, and definitely the competition in camp. I think that is probably the more important piece. And Tata talked about it on two occasions during this group stage. Once in Denver, when he essentially talked about the depth in his squad and the luxury that he has, and that what that becomes when you have injuries and you have opportunities for players that maybe came into camp thinking, I'm just here. Now there's competition. There's competition for playing time in key positions. For instance, the front three and the midfield three. And so Uriel Antuna is one of those guys that, what Tata said when I asked him after the game against Martinique, he said he looked at me. He's like, "You're right. Like he was a fringe player. He was not considered a first team 23-man squad player before I named the squad." And yes, it's true that he's in the squad because of some injuries. But what he saw, what the staff has seen in Antuna in training, is a guy that is just extremely hungry, and that wasn't just happy to be, on the Mexican national team for the first time. He's a guy that wants to be there, that wants to play, that trains very hard. And what Tata said is, like, when he showed up before camp, we had never seen him train. I mean, they were just watching film from the Galaxy, and they liked what they saw. Back in May, when Tata was here in Atlanta promoting their match against Venezuela, he brought him up as a player that he was going to consider. But they hadn't seen him up close, and so they were very impressed with the way he approaches training. The fact that the stage is just it's not big for him, for a young player to be playing for his national team in a continental tournament. So yeah, I think a combination of just taking advantage of opportunities that Tata, I think, told the players were going to be there, and then that increased competition within the camp, because this is a squad that these guys are fighting for places when they get to qualifying. This is a World Cup qualifying prep for Mexico for a lot of these players, because once we get into CONCACAF qualifying, the players that said no before, they're going to be back in the squad. We expect at least some of them. And so that'll change things as far as how we rotate. A guy like Antuna, can he maintain? Can he stay within the starting lineup, especially when a guy like Rodolfo Pizarro gets healthy again? So yeah, but I think Antuna is an interesting story. He's leading. He's the team's leading scorer, and he's showing a lot of potential.
And you mentioned the Mexican press a while back. I wanted to ask about that, because it does feel like at least to an outsider that Mexico performing well, undefeated so far under Tata. In the past, it's felt like a bit of like an acrimonious and negative relationship between the Mexican press and the manager. I don't know if that was specific to Juan Carlos Osorio. I'm wondering how Tata has been kind of perceived and covered from your perception by the Mexican press so far.
Yeah, that's a great question, Taylor, because I've noticed, I've taken notice of that. I was very interested in seeing that type of the dynamic between Tata Martino and the Mexican press, throughout, in the stay in Denver and then again in Charlotte. Once again, going back to May when he was here in Atlanta to promote that game against Venezuela, that's, I started to see that this is a manager. He's always been confident in front of the media. But to your point, yes, I think there was this idea that the Mexican press is kind of like this snake pit that can eat up and spit out managers with ease. And I think what they're seeing in Tata Martino is a guy that just really knows how to manage the media, and he knows how to use the microphone both to his advantage, and he's very prepared. He's always prepared. And so I think, with Juan Carlos Osorio, it was interesting because it was always about the rotation. It was that the media, the press knew that was something that they could always kind of not go after, but it was always going to be a headline. Oh, Juan Carlos Osorio rotated again. The famous rotaciones. Mm-hmm. And with Tata, I think there isn't this one thing that they can point to and poke holes through quite yet. Before the Gold Cup, I felt like they were searching. The Mexican press was searching for those things. Like, it started with the squad depth, the fact that he only called in 29 of the possible 40, the fact that there's only one number 9 and Raul Jimenez. And before the Gold Cup started, they were really trying to poke holes in those decisions. And he just, he had an answer for everything. And I think what's happening is that now the team is performing and the results are coming through on the field. And so that's why, again, in Charlotte against Martinique, he was a little upset with the question about, look at this, like this is Mexico. You struggled against a team that isn't even recognized by FIFA. And I think that I've noticed, like, the day after, a lot, Fox Sports Mexico, a lot of their pieces were about Mexico underperforming against a very soft opponent. And he was adamant after that game and saying, like, that's not the case. I don't agree with that question. I don't agree with that line of questioning. And so I think it'll be an interesting dynamic, but I think it's one that he was prepared for. I think you can go back to his days in La Liga, covering when he was at Barcelona. The Spanish press is also very, very intense, very critical. Same with Argentina. And so I don't think this is anything that he's not accustomed to.
I do want to go to the Copa America in just a second, but first, one more question about Mexico. They've got Costa Rica in the knockout round. Maybe not necessarily a draw that they were expecting, but here we are. What are you expecting for that knockout round game? Is it going to be a little bit of rotation? Do you think it's going to be the strongest possible team? And how big of a threat do you think Costa Rica will be to that Mexico squad?
Yeah, I think it's, Tata will go with his strongest possible team. I think now he'll start to, even though he talked a lot about in the group stage about Mexico, playing inferior opponents and how that can be a detriment to their, World Cup preparation and just like their long-term project. He was sure to say that all opponents are respected, and that he knew that down the road they were going to start to play teams like Costa Rica, Panama, and obviously potentially the U.S. that are teams that are considered very strong within CONCACAF. So I think now they're going to get that, and I would expect the strongest line possible. I think those players that I've mentioned before, like Rodolfo Pizarro, even Hector Moreno, their center back, these are guys that have been nursing injuries, and that the technical staff is not rushed back into these games knowing that they were easily qualified and that they were going to need them down the road. So I think we'll start to see those guys back into the starting lineup. We'll see a strong starting lineup for Mexico. And then I think they're facing, it's an old rival in Costa Rica, but I think with Costa Rica, they're in on the opposite side of the spectrum as far as where development is and where this roster is when you compare them to Mexico. Mexico they're playing with essentially a second team in a tournament, and they're dominating. Costa Rica, a new manager that has experience managing in Liga MX, won, I think, 2 back-to-back titles with Leon. And these were teams that were heralded in Mexico as being attack-minded and exciting. And the problem he's having with Costa Rica is that the process of kind of rejuvenating the squad, it's an old squad. It's an old squad, hasn't come about yet. Like if you look at the roster, it's still somewhat heavily dominated with the old guard, and some of the younger players just have not been able to perform, and so they've struggled. And just kind of quickly reading Costa Rican press this morning, that was the issue, that this is a team that is not advancing, it's not progressing, and they're starting to fall behind in a CONCACAF region that, if it shouldn't be difficult to come out of this region if you're one of those, that top three of U.S., Mexico, and Costa Rica. So I don't think Mexico was expecting to play Costa Rica, but it could help them. If Tata wants stiffer competition, and for his young players to be locked in earlier, then I think this helps Mexico. For Costa Rica, they're not, they might see themselves as, okay, like we're not the favorites here. But they still have good players. I think when they see Mexico in front of them, they're not intimidated by the shirt, by the jersey, by the crest or the flag. And so I think it really does become a somewhat even match, just because it is a knockout stage, of the tournament.
All right. Well, for anybody wondering why we love having Felipe on, it's because he says things like, "I was reading the Costa Rican press earlier this morning." I can't say that I've ever done that. So well done to you, my friend. That's the Gold Cup. In Copa America knockout round, we've got Brazil v Paraguay, Colombia, Chile, Argentina, Venezuela, and Uruguay, Peru in the quarterfinals. What are you expecting from those games? There's 4 there. I'm guessing you've got a decent amount to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, this is what we expected, right? It's now we're in the knockout stage. It's, none of the invited teams made it through. So if you're a traditionalist like me, I've no issues admitting that. Like, I love to see, a Copa America knockout stage with South American teams. And so I think not the biggest story, but an interesting part of Copa America 2019, it's always that third place team that qualifies. And so Paraguay, look at Paraguay. They haven't won a match yet. They didn't win. They have 2 ties and a draw, and they were able to advance. And so I guess the reward for lackluster play and not winning is playing the host nation. And so, but at the same time, they must be, I'm sure when the matches ended yesterday, and they saw that both, that Ecuador and Japan tied, and it kind of allowed them to be one of the best thirds. They were probably looking at it as we're still alive. It's another opportunity, and they'll face the host nation and try to advance. But I don't see Brazil having any much trouble there. I think Brazil found their groove. We spoke last week about Tite and what he's doing with that team without Neymar, and I think he found kind of the creative and attacking formula. I was not concerned, but I questioned why he had Casemiro and Fernandinho in that starting lineup against Bolivia, when they should have just walked over Bolivia, and instead he had 2 defensive midfielders there, which just limited their creativity, which we saw especially in the first half of that game. And so since then, Fernandinho has gone to the bench. He's stuck with just 1 defensive midfielder in Casemiro, and he's brought in Barcelona's Artur, who I think if you've seen him play, he's quality. He can create, he can possess, he can, I've seen comparisons to Iniesta. I'm not going to go that far, but I can see why. He's that type of player that can kind of do a little bit of everything in a midfield 3. And so Brazil is looking very good. And then I think if you go down against the kind of the bottom of the other bracket where you have Uruguay and Peru, again, Peru just got thrashed 5-0, and they're still in, because of that, the first win. But it's like they kind of backed into the knockout round after an embarrassing defeat, 5-0 to Brazil. And so, and now they have to face, their reward is to face a team like Uruguay that is expected, to be in the final. And so those for Paraguay and Peru, who I feel are kind of the 2 teams that have struggled the most, even though Peru looked okay, in some of their matches, they're going to have a tough time. I think they got, a tough draw. And Uruguay, I'll say this quickly about Uruguay. Yesterday, I think, was just a classic game that it's what they do to opponents. Even though Chile completely rotated, and I'll drop this one again. I was reading the Chilean press. Today. because I wanted to see what they had to say. They were, Ronaldo Reyna, the Colombian manager, rotated, rested starters, even changed a bit of the formation. And I was seeing on Twitter that some people that are in Chile covering the team were concerned about that. Why experiment at this late stage? But he was very open about it after the game. He's like, I needed to rest players. We had a plan. And they were preparing for the knockout stage. And I think in the first half, they looked really, on the front foot. They had Uruguay, in their own box. They were attacking. It looked like kind of like a 3-3. There was a kind of a strange formation, like 3 in the back, 3 in the middle, and then just kind of like a stacked attack. And they were doing a little bit, I wouldn't say they were doing damage, but they had a lot of the ball. But I think the problem when you do that with a team like Uruguay, if you have a lot of the ball, you need to be effective, and they just weren't effective. And so a team like Uruguay is okay, defending and kind of, just being a nuisance, because they know that in the 85th minute, they have guys like Cavani and Suarez that can just, put you to bed after you've done 85 minutes of excellent work. And so for me, it was like a typical game from Uruguay, and they'll continue to advance.
Stick with Uruguay for a second. I saw the clips during the round of Luis Suarez calling for a handball off of the goalkeeper. What happened there? Am I like seeing an edited version of this, or was he actually thinking maybe the goalkeeper handled the ball?
Yeah, I think it's like classic Luis Suarez. That's just always kind of looking for, it's part of his history, right? Like the handball in the World Cup, the biting, the theatrics. It's just what he does. He's a top striker, but it's just part of his game. Some of my friends in Colombia that we, I have a WhatsApp group chat with some from friends in Colombia, and one guy was like, this is so typical of Uruguay, and in the VAR world that we're in, this doesn't set up very good for their opponents, where, they're very skilled at kind of trying to manipulate, the referee and just the rules of the game. And again, I think all South American countries, you could kind of say that about when it gets into these, these intense types of tournaments. But Uruguay and Suarez especially, I feel like they're just really good at that, the gamesmanship. And so, I've watched the video several times. He tried to call a handball on a goalkeeper inside the penalty area. And what was funny is that he also tried to get the Chilean defender Jara either ejected or carded for tripping the pitch invader.
Yep.
And so it's like Suarez is like just such a character. And so, I think even though those are kind of fun parts of what's happening with Copa America 2019, it's part of the DNA of Uruguay as well.
Yeah, as like further emphasis on that one, Daryl was telling me yesterday the story that Falcao was telling about the first time he played Jimenez, and how, have you heard that story?
Yeah.
I feel like there's a decent chance you can tell it better than I can. Would you mind kind of talking our listeners through it if they haven't heard it?
Yeah, well, here's what's funny about that story, is because what I've read from I guess sources or just outlets that I trust is that it started with one part of the story is true, the other part is parody. The first part of the story where Jimenez said yes, like it was one of his first starts for Uruguay, and he was facing Falcao, and this was the best number 9 in the world, Falcao. Okay, so this is when Falcao was at his very best, and Jimenez was somewhat starstruck with him. And so what I understand as being true is that he asked him like randomly like what car he drives. Jimenez asked Falcao, what kind of car do you drive? And kind of just like tried to small talk him throughout the game. That was the question that Falcao confirmed. Like, yeah, this guy's asking me like what kind of car I drive. It was kind of bizarre. And then a parody account or a parody newspaper, I don't know if it was in Spain, kind of took that and then created this story about how Jimenez asked him everything from, you probably know better than me. Like, what was?
It was like how many P's are in September? I think was one of them.
Yeah, exactly. How many P's are in September? Like, how many days are in June? Like, and it just kind of like carried on from there. And even Marca, one of the biggest kind of media outlets in Spain, grabbed onto that. And I saw later that the additional questions were part of like kind of a parody. But But the first part is true. That Jimenez, and that's again, I think that is, to your point. Yes, that is part of the Uruguayan gamesmanship. They'll do anything to kind of get in your head and gain an advantage.
I like it. Even if it was like started off, that does feel like a constructed narrative of like starts off starstruck. You're just like, I want to ask you so many questions, and it ends with like, yes, I totally meant to distract him with all my questioning. It was totally goes to plan. So we'll see what happens for Uruguay against Peru. We should probably talk before I let you go about Argentina, Venezuela, Colombia, Chile. Argentina, Venezuela held Brazil scoreless, although I think that was a little bit controversial as well. Argentina struggled early. They've made it through. So what are you expecting from this one? Have Argentina started to turn it around, or do you think we might be seeing a pretty big upset here?
Well, I think Argentina, we're out. What I'm seeing is now they have made some tactical changes. So against Colombia, they essentially came out in a 4-4-2 with two like holding midfielders in Guido Rodriguez and Leandro Paredes, and it wasn't very effective. I think we talked about that last week and how there was a lack of they just weren't cohesive at all, in the midfield, and Colombia really took advantage of their confusion. And so Lionel Scaloni, their managers changed to a 4-3-3 against Paraguay. Well, I guess it was more of an attacking 4-4-2, but he took out Guido Rodriguez. He left Paredes as the lone kind of holding midfielder. Took off Aguero, brought in Lautaro Martinez. But I think for me, the key there was that he didn't have two like really defensive midfielders that weren't able to create. So I think from game to game, he's been trying to find the right attacking formula. And even against Qatar, then finally he did go to a very typical and standard 4-3-3 with Paredes as the lone holding midfielder. Lo Celso was kind of out wide. Paul, who has come on and essentially replaced Di Maria, was pretty effective as well. And then, he went with a new front three of Messi, Martinez, Lautaro Martinez from Inter Milan, and Aguero. And, even though it was a 2-0 result for them against Qatar, I think they're still very individualistic. They're relying on some mistakes from their opponents. And some just great individual play from their star players. I mean, Aguero's goal was just kind of an unassisted golazo where he just kind of took on the entire defense and finished pretty casually. But I think now they're facing a Venezuela side that they recently lost to in a friendly in Madrid. I don't have the data exact, but I'm pretty sure that they have not beaten Venezuela in their last, I think, 4 matchups. And so this is, that says a lot about Venezuela as well, like their new generation that is coming off a U20 final loss to England. I think 2 years ago in the U20 World Cup. A manager that is come up from the U20 ranks, that coaches both the U20s and the senior men's national team, in Rafael Dudamel, so he understands the roster that he has in front of him, the strengths, and he's trying to change, the way that opponents prepare for Venezuela. Like I said before, I think Venezuela still is slightly too conservative, and I think they'll look like that against Argentina. It'll look like, again, like a 5-4-1, which Dudamel is somewhat married to. I don't think we'll see Joseph Martinez until maybe in the second half, because he really does stick with Salomon Rondon as their lone striker, and he'll just try to hassle Argentina and keep that score as tight as possible.
All right, and then final question. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but Colombia, Chile, I'm going to guess you're pretty excited about this one. Chile finished second in their group on 6 points. Colombia, only team, I think, to win all 3 games. I've seen some reporting that, but they haven't been as impressive, or they've been sort of, dull at times. Then I've seen other reporting that says they are far and away the best team in the tournament right now. I'm guessing you're sort of on the side of best team of the tournament. So what are your thoughts on Colombia now? Are you still enjoying life under Carlos Queiroz, and then what are you expecting for this game?
Yeah, I think they've been the most consistent team of the tournament. I wouldn't say they're the best team, but just numbers wise, 9 points out of 3 games, no goals conceded, and they were able to play their second team against Paraguay in the final group stage match. And even though it was a 1-0 victory, it seems kind of tight. There were spells where they just completely dominated Paraguay. Paraguay could not touch the ball, and Colombia looked very confident. So I think that's what I like, and what I think even a neutral would see from this Colombian team, that they look very confident. They have a deep squad. And Carlos Queiroz, like we said last week, he's pushing the team a little bit more forward. They're a bit more vertical than they were under Peckerman in the last World Cup, and so they're definitely still a favorite. But this is a Copa America, and Chile is the defending champion, and Chile is a good team. And so I was telling a journalist in Charlotte a couple of days ago. He asked me about Colombia, and I'm like, I don't get too high, because at the end I'll say something like, well, they'll probably lose to Chile. And this is before the knockout stage was set, and so now they're facing Chile, who knocked them, eliminated Colombia from the Copa America in 2016 here in the U.S. And went on to win it. They have a Colombian manager who understands, even though he said yesterday in some of those reports that his familiarity with the squad really means nothing. I think it sets up for a very juicy matchup, one that should be plenty, attack-minded from both teams. And one that I still feel like Colombia just has a little bit more. I think defensively they're just very solid. Their center backs can eat up a lot of, if a team like Chile just decides to lump the ball forward and kind of bypass midfield, which that's Colombia's strength. I'm pretty confident that Colombia's center backs can take care of that.
All right. Well, those games are all happening near the end of the week this weekend. Mexico playing Costa Rica, I believe, this weekend as well. So maybe we can get you back on next week to give us an update on everything we've talked about today, if that works for you.
Let's do it. Yeah, happy to.
All right, excellent. Well, Felipe, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you've got a lot to get to today, so I don't want to take up any more, but I just wanted to say thank you once again.
All right, man. Take it easy.
So that was Taylor talking to Felipe Cardenas. More from Felipe, as Taylor said, as the Copa America progresses. Mm-hmm. Knockout rounds, baby.
Yep.
Knockout rounds.
Yep.
We're going to talk Women's World Cup.
We
Italy,
are.
China, Netherlands, Japan. But first, today's Total Soccer Show is sponsored by FBref, FBref.com. You can get all kinds of soccer stats there, including, we focus on the Women's World Cup stats, right? And we're going to do that today. But there's a whole world of other stats out there as well.
This is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
They got men's soccer stats as well.
I was slightly nervous that you were going to spring one on me by going to a completely other competition that I was not paying attention to.
Yeah.
Pull stats from there.
Who played the most minutes in the EFL Cup last year?
Oh boy.
I don't know the answer.
Somebody whose name I don't know.
I haven't looked it up.
All right. That's
you
good.
could look it up on FBref.com, I believe.
A Man City reserve player? That's my answer. No, but they also have maybe more pertinent stats to our conversation today, or to any conversation about the Women's World Cup. For example, Daryl Grove, do you know which goalkeeper has the most clean sheets in this tournament?
It was the German goalkeeper, whose name escapes me.
Is that your answer?
Yes.
You are correct.
Yeah.
It is the German goalkeeper, Alma Schultz, has 4. And Germany have not conceded a goal yet in this tournament.
She's tried giving the ball away to opponents a couple of times.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's more about Germany than it is about Shaw.
Hey, you don't know these things. But yeah, you might be right. Alyssa Nair has 3, and then there are many, many other goalkeepers who have 2 clean sheets thus far in the tournament.
Okay. I have a couple of stats for you from USA versus Spain. I've gone back and looked at the game page for that USA versus Spain game. Mm-hmm. US passing accuracy, what would you guess that it was?
Not as good as it probably should have been, but still higher than you'd expect, 87%.
76%.
What? Wow, that's low.
It's low, but when you think how many big direct balls there were, it's not bad, right? I feel like there's a lot of you got to put these stats in context. So I think you can look at that and think, oh, the US is bad at passing, but you think of so many direct passes, it's not so bad.
I think that's pretty bad, because I remember there were times when we used to do that in our specific predictions, passing completion percentage stats, and it was always higher than you thought, even when you thought the player had a bad game, because there are so many short, quick passes. Mm-hmm. To me, that says they were far more long balls than I kind of remember that did not come off in that game.
Can you guess how many saves were made in this game?
0.
0.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, 0. The shots on target were 1 for Spain.
Yep.
2 for the US on the penalty kicks.
Yep.
Yeah, 0 saves.
Yeah, I can't really fault either goalkeeper for either of those statistics. Well, maybe you can fault Alyssa Nair a little bit for that one.
It's more about not enough shots on target, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is maybe if you want to blame, you can say Megan Rapinoe, Rose Lavelle putting their shots wide or over the bar, but they were close, just not quite on target.
Shelburne Heath not shooting, I think also probably didn't help. Yeah.
She had one go, didn't she? Try and cross/shoot one, but it ended up wide. She tried to sort of repeat the trick that she pulled off against Sweden. Didn't work out the second time.
For our thoughts on USA Spain, you can go back and listen to that one.
50 minutes of them.
Yeah. It's been nothing but positive comments in response.
Yeah, weirdly right. People seem very negative about a 2-1 win in a World Cup round of 16.
There you go.
I love Twitter. Okay, fbref.com. No one gets at you on fbref.com. It's a very friendly place.
Yeah.
It's got all the stats. It's also got the newsletter, the StatHead newsletter. You can sign up for that when you click the link in the navbar.
There we are. So
Thanks
thank
to
you
FBref.
very much to FBref for sponsoring today's episode. I did it first.
You sure did, buddy. You're the most politest.
You can tell, by the way, I beat you to it and then yelled, I did it first over top, that I'm the most polite. Yeah.
Shall we talk Italy-China, the first round of 16 game of today?
You know, Dara, if that's what you want to do, because I'm the most polite, I want to do what you want to do.
All right.
So yes, let's do that.
We also
then.
pre-agreed that this would be the first game we
yes.
talked about. So this game finished Italy 2, China 0. Goals from Giacinti or Giacinti?
Whatever you want. Again,
I mean, one of them's correct and one of them's not.
I know, I just don't want to go out on the limb.
Goals from Giacinti and Galli. 2-0 to Italy. I want to talk about both of the goals.
Sure.
One's maybe prettier than the other.
Yes.
I also want to talk about Italy's weird tactical change halfway through the first half.
Yeah. Which would you like to start with?
Let's go with the tactics. So Italy start in what's become their standard 4-3-1-2, where you have Girelli as the number 10 underneath two strikers. But then one of the strikers is Bonacia, who kind of roams around on the left a little bit as well. It's an oddly sort of flexible attacking situation from Italy, right? But then I can't remember the
39th minute.
39th minute, Italy sub out Girelli and replace her with Galli, who's more of a sort of energetic box-to-box midfielder. Switch it up to a straight 4-3-3.
Yes.
So before we start to talk about the tactics, why was Girelli subbed out?
So the reporting at the time, and I believe since, so it's been consistent, has been that it was related to the heat. I guess very hot where the game was being played.
I mean, it was 69 degrees in my apartment.
Well, yeah, see, there you go. They should have played it there.
They should have.
But I think it's also, as was pointed out in the game, I think that Italy thus far have only used 13 or I think 14 players so far in the competition. So I think there was an argument of like maybe not as much rest as they would have liked, at least, combined with the heat, combined with not much rotation, meant that there was like a fatigue issue for Girelli. But I also
is it heat exhaustion, but it's actually heat plus exhaustion.
Yes, yeah, there you go. But I also think it was sort of maybe a change brought about by Girelli, looking tired, struggling, especially like in the minutes before she subbed off. There's like the Gamma, like maybe it was a high kick, but it doesn't end up being given. But her clearance off of that is bad.
When you've got long legs and the player is stupid down.
You will get no
That's my
argument from
defensive
me.
karma. Right?
But I bring that up only to say that then, like, after that, when you want the ball kind of authoritatively cleared, I think Girelli, because she's so tired, just kind of hacks at it and barely makes contact.
I guess when one of your most talented players, she's a technically very good player, and she has great technique. She's a number 10. She literally wears number 10. If she can't even clear an easy soccer ball, there's trouble there, right?
There definitely is. And I think also Italy looked kind of so dominant and up for it and caused China so many problems in the first 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah, they score in the 15th minute, right? We'll talk about that.
And I think a big part of it was the kind of level of energy they were putting into that, kind of the pressure, the defense they were playing. And I think if you're Girelli, I equate it with like if you play a player in FIFA too many times and then like they start the game with like a yellow bar instead of the green bar, they drop really fast.
It gets red real fast.
And I think that's what happened here. I think it also coincides with China starting to kind of get back into the game, getting a bit more of the ball, getting a few more chances, and I think the decision was made even before halftime we got to change this up to make sure that we kind of get to halftime with this lead.
And I think if you're the Italy coach, I think maybe part of the having only playing 14 players is there aren't many players as good enough to replace the players, right? There's not another Bonacia. There's not another Girelli. So my guess is if they're taking out this sort of, it's like a free roll number 10, right? 4-3-1-2. She's the one and she can kind of do whatever she wants. If you don't have another player of that quality, you're not going to go and ask them to play that role because you don't get the same results out of it, right? So the switch is to go to Galli, who's more energetic, and a straight up simpler 4-3-3, right? It has a bit more structure to it, and everybody's working hard. No one has a free role.
It really does. You're absolutely right, though. It does speak to like the difference
Lack
in
of
quality.
depth.
Yeah, that like I'd rather go with a player who's 60% fit, I guess, than somebody else who maybe hasn't played that position and might not be up to it in the knockout round. You kind of can't roll the dice, even if that means that you have to burn a substitute before halftime.
Yep. I mean, no one got burned,
no,
to be clear.
That's true.
The heat exhaustion wasn't that bad.
That's good.
So, they switched to the 4-3-3. But let's talk about the goal first.
Sure.
Giacinti scores in the 15th. A lot of passes by Italy that weren't completed but were then deflected back into Italian paths is how I am going to describe this goal.
Yeah, that's fair. It's a very fortuitous goal from Italy.
Kind of is,
now,
right?
there is the element of like you make your own luck a little bit, and
Yeah.
you kind of keep battling, and maybe eventually something comes off. But I think it was also China being caught out by a couple bad plays that leads to a counterattack that then they're kind of trying to like put out fires where they can. We continue with the fire analogy, and it ends up
Were you
with a goal.
feeling the heat today?
Apparently I was, yes.
So maybe you could describe this, if you're going to be more charitable, you describe it as a counterattack and then a press.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Because Giuliano, excuse me, not the former mayor of New York, tries to launch a counterattack with a really nice looking ball.
It's charitable of you to give him that title. But
Yeah,
cool, go ahead.
I'm feeling generous.
Yeah.
Fox News hack, Giuliani.
I would have gone lunatic, but sure, whatever.
With a ball, like she splits the lines, right, down the right, and
Yeah.
she is looking for Giacinti down the right. But it's cut out. It is, I mean, technically intercepted because the defender, I've forgotten who the defender is. I think it's one of the centre-backs because both the centre-backs are over there.
Yeah.
Briefly
I think
has
it's
possession
Lin.
of the
I
ball.
think Lin slides over, collects the ball, and then tries to play it back down the line, but plays it into Giacinti's foot instead.
Yeah.
And that basically Giacinti then plays herself inadvertently into a counterattack because now she's wide open in space.
She
down the
releases
channel.
herself down the right
Pretty
wing,
much,
right?
yes.
Yeah. So China is scrambling.
Yep.
Obviously, China is scrambling. Cut it back to Bonacia, top of the box. Maybe your most talented player, definitely the most famous player on the Italy team. Bonacia makes an absolute mess of this.
Yep.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
Like stumbles over the ball. Like I think she's trying to do like a top of the ball roll, like a sole of the foot roll, but kind of messes it up.
Yes, I think so. If I were being charitable, I would say that a few different times in this tournament, it does feel like the fields haven't been watered enough. And when it's hot, when there's not enough water, the grass not really gets sticky, but that's the best way to explain it. The ball doesn't move as quickly. And this did feel like one of those situations when she expected the ball to move a little bit faster and it didn't, so that it got caught under her feet as a result.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's trying to play a pass to Bartoli, the left back, who has made a lung-busting overlapping run, right? She has got all the way up there because the right back for China, Han, is out of position because of the counter-attack. So great stuff from Bartoli to get all the way up. And again, Bonacia messes up the pass, but it deflects off a Chinese defender into the path of Bartoli. Italy just keep getting lucky.
They do.
Yeah.
And sort of that continues here because Bartoli is... it's like tough to say if like the shot it happens at the same time that she's taken out, but Peng Shumen comes out, tries to make a play. Yeah, and there was some argument that maybe even if this goal doesn't end up being scored, that maybe it gets brought back for a penalty because she comes up pretty recklessly.
Yeah.
But it ends up falling to Giacinti anyway, and she's able. I mean, it doesn't necessarily fall to her. She has to cover a little bit of ground.
Yeah,
but
I mean, she's
there to
coming
smash
from
it
the
home.
right wing to the centre, right?
Yeah.
She deserves the goal, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And Italy kind of deserve the goal.
No, I think they do. I mean, I mean, again, you kind of force things to happen and then try to panic a little bit and keep panicking, and then eventually you find a way to score.
All right.
I do think, though, that then Italy sort of had the more traditional mindset of, okay, we're 1-0 up now. China were maybe going to be a little bit more defensive. They're maybe going to just try to keep their lines and frustrate and look for the counter. Now they have to come at us. So now we can back off a little bit and try to catch them in a counterattack and catch them being a bit open. And I think this is a case where maybe the fatigue factors into it, but it's also a case that once you take your foot off the gas a little bit to invite that pressure, well, that pressure comes, and then you've got to be able to deal with it. And I think Italy kind of got hit a little bit here and started to struggle, and that's why I think they also make the change near the end of the first half. We've already talked about
when comes out,
But then I think at halftime they kind of reassert their plan to come out and be aggressive from the kickoff because they score pretty quickly after halftime.
They do, and am I right in thinking that when they score after halftime, it's from a bit of a press?
Yes.
Yeah, it's from going after China,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, it's Galli eventually scores, but it's a shot from distance. But it comes about, because it's Italy kind of, again, making China uncomfortable, putting them in pressure in their own defensive third, eventually in their own defensive third in the corner, and they try to basically play it out.
Right?
Yeah.
Liu is trying to sort of play a pass out, but she is swarmed by Italians, and the pass is picked off by the Italian right-back, Guani. Steps and wins it, gives it to Gali, and then Gali hits that shot.
Yeah.
Gali gosh, as I think tweeted, and it was not a welcome tweet.
You knew it was not going to be, but you went for it anyway.
I know.
But I want to say, like Wang Yi, she absolutely steps and wins that ball. I think the ball is intended for Wang Shanshan. I think.
Yeah.
It's tough to see from
So
the
he was
replay. But just like that right there is the sequence that I don't think happened at the end of the first half would have happened in the first half. I think Wang Yi would have been sitting off a little bit more, trying to be a little bit more conservative, and then China would have been able to play out of that press from Italy, and I think did on occasion, especially at the end of the first half, find ways to get out of the press because it wasn't quite as determined.
Yeah.
Here, when Italy refocus, they win the ball back, a quick little pass, and you've got the lead.
Yep.
Or you've got your second goal, rather.
There's no exit. No exit. So can we talk about this goalie strike just for a second? Doesn't have much bend or spin on it. It's kind of just from distance, arrowed into the bottom corner. And I think you made the comparison. Like, it's almost like the Rapinoe penalties that we talked about yesterday, but just from distance.
Yeah.
Pick your spot and laser it in
Sniper.
there.
That's what I mean.
Sniper.
Go for that corner, go low, because if nothing else, you'll make the keeper have to make a decision about, maybe it's going wide, but I still got to put a hand to it. So, like, worst case scenario is maybe you're getting a corner out of it.
Yeah.
And then best case scenario, you're scoring the second goal and giving your team a cushion.
Italy 2, China 0 is the final score. Italy through to the quarterfinals, where they will face, correct me if I'm wrong, they'll face the Netherlands.
You are correct.
Which means either Italy or the Netherlands will be in the World Cup semi-finals.
Yes.
This kind of blows my mind. Am I alone in this?
No, I don't think so.
You wouldn't have bet on either of these teams. You'd bet them to do well, but you wouldn't have bet on them to make the semis at the start of this tournament.
Which also guarantees them, I believe, a spot in the Olympics, because I believe the top three...
One of them, yeah.
I think the top three teams from Europe all will qualify. So the 3 European teams who will make the semifinals will be going to the Olympics. So
well, you're assuming that the US makes the semifinals. There could be 4 European teams make the semifinals.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't think about that.
Actually, this could be, looking ahead,
boy. Yeah.
this could be the first time where... is there a third-place playoff game in this tournament? I'm not sure. I'm going to guess that there is.
There may have to be.
Where it could actually have something on the line other than some weird bronze medal.
Yeah, you're right.
Olympic qualification on the line.
Shoot, man, I was so excited for one of these teams to get to go to the Olympics. All right, now the USA needs to definitely win against France.
It sure does.
Yes.
All right, that game is on Friday. We'll talk about that as we get closer. Today's other round of 16 game was the Netherlands, the aforementioned Netherlands. I guess, spoiler alert, I've already said they're in the quarters.
Yep.
They beat Japan 2-1, but it was a close thing.
It really was.
It really was a close thing. Japan had a weird tactical setup that I want to talk about. Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to say up front, this was a very strange game to me, because for the first 30 minutes or so, I thought this game was going to finish like 3-0 to the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And in the 80th minute, I was sure that Japan were going to find a way to win, because they had so many chances in like a 10-minute period near the end of the game that I thought, okay, they found their gear. They're going to end up pulling it off. And then it ends up in a 90th minute penalty. It was a dramatic game that I did not quite expect to happen the way it did.
Let's be thankful that there are no casinos here in Virginia, so you couldn't have gone and put money on any of your hunches.
Yes. No, it's been well established that I should never bet on any of my hunches.
So why did Japan go with this weird tactical setup that I was talking about, where they essentially had, I would call it a 4-4-2 defensive shape to face up to the Netherlands that was nice and compact, very tight lines, but was high, right? It was quite high up the field. When you know that Shanice van der Sanden and Lieke Martens both love to get in behind it, and that's the Netherlands' whole game plan.
Yeah.
Why would you open that up?
I think that
And why did it nearly work?
I have two guesses for this.
Okay.
I think one is that I think they kind of set their line at the wrong point. I think and I think that is what starts to cause the Dutch problems, especially in the second half, is Japan keep the roughly the same shape, but they drop about 10 yards deeper pretty consistently, so there isn't so much space in behind.
So the shape was right, and having the compact 4-4-2, like tight defensive lines, tight defensive midfield forward lines tight together was right. But just being too high up the field is just some weird mistake that they made.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes about
Speaking of weird mistakes, we'll talk about Netherlands' first goal.
We certainly will. But I think because the other idea is that if you can get that line a little bit higher up, maybe in the 4-4-2, the two banks of four with the two in front, it makes it really hard for the Dutch to find passes through the midfield and from their defense into the midfield.
So it's about stopping like Danielle van der Donk getting the ball literally between the lines, between the midfield and defense line. If you squeeze that tight together, there's no room for her to do it. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, but in the beginning, I think Japan's line was a little too high, and I think also they were a little bit too eager when it did seem like there was an opportunity to go put some of the Dutch players under pressure. Yeah. So then it would get a little bit stretched. There would be space. The Dutch could play through it, and then when Japan would try to like close the lines, now you've opened up more space in behind, and then the Dutch were finding that the gap.
So this kind of explains the Netherlands' first goal, right? So it comes from a corner kick, but the corner kick is won by a ball from Bloodworth, the centre-back. He's like chipped out wide left to the number 10, Van der Donk, and I think it's really telling that Van der Donk couldn't find space in the middle, so she had to go all the way to the wing. So in that way, the Japan plan is working. But then because the line is high, Van der Donk can play Lieke Martens, maybe the most dangerous player on the field, in behind, down the line. And Martens can get a cross in, which leads to the corner kick. So that's an example of Japan's plan working, then not working in two phases.
And it's also like the case that ball from Bloodworth, it's not as though she is like, only 25 yards from her own goal and she hits this big long diagonal. She's basically at midfield. And I think it's also
delicate little chip, basically, right?
And I think this is where Japan were too conservative. Like, they basically were too high up at times, then they were too far back at times, and then I think in the second half, they kind of figured it out. It was a Goldilocks situation.
So it's like the focus was on the tightness of the lines, and they'd almost secondary was where all the lines should be positioned, and that was the problem.
Because, in the first, the goal is in, the 17th minute, but prior to that, I think 4 different attacks nearly come off for the Dutch by attacking specifically the Japanese right side, the Dutch left side, with those long balls over the top or kind of direct balls in
Martins
behind.
Mostly?
Yeah. And so here, as you've said, this one, it ends up being the sort of semi-long diagonal and then a good through ball because that line is high. It ends up being blocked out for a corner kick, though. And then we have a very pretty goal because I think it was intentional.
So
I'm choosing to believe it was, at least.
It's the corner kick. Martins does a mid-air back heel that nutmegs Sugasawa, the Japanese player, to score. It's going to be one of the most memorable goals of this tournament, right? So we can maybe talk later about Martins' technique and how she does this. But the more interesting thing to me is the absolute mess Japan make of their marking system.
Yeah, I enjoyed it immensely because when we rewatched it together, we were both sort of like, okay, so Japan are in a 4v4. No, wait, there's 5 Dutch players.
Yep.
So there's just 4 Japanese defenders marking 5 Dutch players.
4 Japanese defenders man-marking 5 Dutch players.
And the one who's not marked is Martins.
Yes.
Yes.
And this was really hard for me because I just could not comprehend that this had happened.
Yeah.
I can't believe that a team at the World Cup did this. I think there must be some mistake.
You kept trying to bail out Japan by being like, but Kumagai is sort of paying attention. It's like, she's 8 yards away.
And she's in a zone, right? Yeah. So Kumagai and I think Sugasawa are essentially in the 6-yard box doing some sort of zonal defending to maybe attack the ball if it comes in there.
Yep.
But then they've left the rest of their team 4 defenders versus 5 Dutch attackers.
Yep.
And again, I cannot understand how this happened. Even on our Sunday team, our amateur Sunday team, someone would say, that player's free, pull someone in or stop zone or go and man mark that player. Make sure if we're going to commit to man marking, you've at least got to have every man covered, right?
Yeah, as the person who routinely stands up top on corner kicks or when we're defending as an outlet, I would be screamed at to come back and help.
Yeah,
that's what you do. Is that fine if you want to have somebody covering the short corner, you would have I think. The Dutch had somebody out there in case they did go short, so I think you had 2 Japanese players out there. Fine, if you want to do that, but then that means, somebody else has to be aware and drop in and be a bit more defensive.
And they pay for this mistake. Yeah. Because it is Lieke Martins who is wide open, so she can make that sort of easy jog, sort of near post jog, meet the ball and back heel it in the air through the legs of Sugasawa, which I'm assuming is accidental, but the back heel was very deliberate.
It was. And maybe she's trying to put it on frame. Obviously, it ends up being the case, so I'm sure she'll claim she was. But if nothing else, she is wide open to flick a ball in to completely change an angle inside the 6-yard box right by the goal.
Yeah.
If nothing else, it's going to make things very confusing for Japan to deal with.
I've just realised the fact that she receives this with her feet, the back heel is the feet, not the head, is a testament to the lack of marking because it means the ball was able to get in there and drop down with no one getting to it first.
And Japan had 2 different players tasked with cutting out that low-driven ball, one of whom was bypassed, one of whom couldn't get to the ball in the end.
1-0 to the Netherlands. But Japan equalised with a really nice passing goal. It's Hasegawa towards the end of the first half, right? 43rd minute or so. There's so much to like about this goal.
Yeah, it's you could see Japan starting to find their footing a little bit. In the 19th minute, there's a sequence that's similar to this one. Sugasawa ends up hitting the post, but she has a kind of good combination play in and around the Dutch box with Hasegawa. So I think that I bring that up just to say that I feel like Japan did start to slow it down closer to when the goal was scored, then it's not quite they only found it at the very end and they managed to get this one goal. Yeah. You could see what they were trying to do.
Right? I think we've said it enough times to not have to repeat it, but they essentially managed to have the line not too high, but keep the compactness so that the Netherlands couldn't pass through them.
Yeah. And then once the Dutch kind of couldn't play the long ball over the top, which I think is an aspect of how Japan were able to deal with it, and they couldn't play through, they ended up still trying to play through and getting caught in possession a lot.
Played 2 Japanese players.
Yeah.
They played the ball directly to Japanese players, then Japan have the ball, then they're able to start some really nice passing moves.
Yes, and in this one, it's, to go back, I think it's Sugita intercepts the ball. She plays in Sugasawa. Sugasawa lays off for Iwabuchi. And Iwabuchi is, I don't know what percentage I'm going to give her, but she gets a significant percentage of the credit for this goal.
Oh, 70 at least.
Hasegawa probably deserves a little bit for making sure she's on side and scoring. I'm giving Hasegawa like 50, and I'm giving Iwabuchi like 40.
Okay.
That's about where I am.
I'm not going to argue with you.
Iwabuchi, when that ball is dropped in by Sugasawa,
I have better things to do.
That's fair. She basically she dummies it. She lets it roll through her legs and turns in the same motion, which blocks off 3 Dutch players who are trying to get to that ball. But then also because they then over pursue, she's able to basically play the ball back in like the direction from whence it came.
She changes direction twice, right? And Dutch defenders are just essentially their heads are spinning at this point.
And it's as evidenced by the fact that back line is something to look at, because it is, if it's a back 4, then like the 2 outside defenders, the 2 fullbacks are a good 3 yards behind the 2 center backs, because I think they've been pulled out and again in a state of sort of flux because they're not quite sure who needs to be where because of this good passing sequence from Japan.
Oh, and how about the finish then? The finish from Hasegawa. Oh, you got more to say about Iwabuchi?
Well, no, I want to jump in to say, but even before the finish, Hasegawa is offside when this kind of starts, when that drop back from Sugasawa happens, and she checks back a good 3 yards to make sure she's onside because she's in line with the far side fullback, so she knows she's good, and then the ball is played in. So that little check two and then running behind is the key there to be in a position to then have a really good finish.
Let's talk about that finish, because I think she absolutely fakes out the keeper.
I didn't at first. I thought at first it was fortuitous. Watching it again, you have me convinced that I think she is shaping up to do. It's like a driven chip because she gets a lot of height behind it, but that's kind of what she needs to do to get it over the goalkeeper.
And she's shaping up like she's going to go bottom left, right? And so the keeper kind of commits to that, and she's leaning back a little bit, and she manages to chip it top right. It's a weird finish, but it's a really clever finish. I like it a lot.
It is, especially because Van Venderal, the Dutch goalkeeper, is off her line quick. And so I think, especially given how close Hasegawa is, Van Venderal is almost able to get there. If she doesn't put it where she puts it, I think it probably gets saved. So
she just needs that bit of misdirection, right? And then, so late in the second half, it's 1-1 at half time. Late in the second half, Japan have, 4 really good chances in the space
4 or 5,
of 10 minutes? This is the moment where you were going to go and put all your money on Japan to win this game, right?
Yeah, because I was pretty it felt to me like, okay, Japan are trying to play this high line. They're trying to be really rigid defensively, a thing that tends to happen when teams are so focused on keeping shape, but also playing a high line and then having to kind of sprint back quickly is that you get tired. It's what happens. And so I kind of expected that eventually the Japanese defenders would be so tired that they would stop kind of making smart defensive plays.
Yeah.
And really, they kind of adjusted to what the Dutch were doing very effectively, and I think kind of tired out the Dutch. I think the Dutch got tired of those runs.
The Dutch got tired of not completing passes.
Yeah.
They wanted to find those passes in midfield, and Japan just weren't letting them do it. Right? This is actually the first time I've really enjoyed Japan. I'll say that. Through the group stage, I just didn't think they were very entertaining to watch. The second half, especially, they're really entertaining to watch. Lots of passing and moving. It makes me excited to see this Japan team again. Yeah. Not at this World Cup, I guess, but maybe some other tournament in the future.
Yeah. Because,
2020 Olympics, they'll be hosting.
That would
They're
make
already
sense.
qualified. They're the probably only team already qualified.
There you go. Yeah, so they'll be there for that. And I would assume, a decent amount of the squad will be there for that.
Yeah.
And I hope they will be because, I think because Japan did figure it out, because I think they ended up not having to exert quite as much energy to continue to cover all the ground they did, I think you see them start to be the more dominant team and have a bit more energy. And that's why you start to see really good passing combinations in the box. A lot of it led by Iwabuchi with some really clever disguised passes, nice back heel, a nice layoff. She was causing lots of problems for the Dutch defense. And I think if there were a little bit better finishing for Japan, they could have gotten a couple goals. In that like 71 to 80 minute period.
Or if in the 88th/89th minute, Kumagai hadn't handballed in the box.
Yes, also that.
So part of this is a Dutch substitution, right? Janice van der Sanden is replaced by Berenstein, not for the first time this tournament. This is definitely the go-to sub for the Dutch, is if things aren't quite working, they don't reshape everything.
Nope.
They just say, all right, Janice van der Sanden, right winger, come off, we'll put Berenstein in, right winger, and we'll just see if that makes a difference. And you would think that it wouldn't, but it absolutely did.
It did.
Because Berenstein went down the right, plays a 1-2 with the fullback, I think, drives into the box. I think she's crossing, more crosses to Sharbox, but it's deflected back to Miedema. Big fan of Miedema here. Miedema's shot is blocked by the hands of Kumagai.
Yes. And, I mean, you loved Miedema just standing there with one hand in the air, just very stoic.
So I love her celebrations because they're so casual. Like, she just casually celebrates a goal. She even appeals for handball in the 89th minute. Casually. Just slowly raise her arm. No gesticulating to the ref. Just stand there with your arm in the air.
Yes.
The most casual player at the World Cup.
We didn't clarify. Somebody sent us a tweet. The somersault, I think it was, that she did, was her brother just telling her she should do that, so she did it. Like, I think that's what it came back from. Or maybe her brother did it, I forget.
It was almost so deadpan it was sarcastic or sardonic.
That was the best part of it. I mean, it's very Dutch. There you go. But yeah.
Very Miedema.
But she definitely gets a good shot to this. It's harsh, I think, because Kumagai is just trying to close the gap, but she does have her arms out. It's not like the natural silhouette. I think there is enough of a distance there for her to maybe be able to like lower her arm. Not necessarily like to see the ball and do it, but when distance is a factor, it probably needs to be a little bit closer.
Yeah,
and also because I think she is sort of scrambling because it is a pass that's cut out or a shot that's cut out. She sort of is then reacting and thus is not quite in control.
Yeah.
So
it's really hard though, right? Because you can say like keep your arms down at all times, but if you've ever ran around and tried to keep your balance, your arms are part of keeping your balance. So your arms do come out from the natural silhouette just naturally for you to keep your balance. So you've got to do that and not get it in the way of the ball. It's a tough job.
It is.
We've seen a lot of penalties called for handball at this World Cup and at the last World Cup where we had VAR.
Yeah, and it is worth noting that Kumagai does similar to what Aslani did yesterday for Sweden. When this happens, if you watch her arms just both immediately go down by her sides and she keeps them down there.
It was never there. You never saw it.
I don't think it was even intentional. I think it's just an automatic reaction when you know that you handled the ball. You kind of panic for a moment. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Penalty is dispatched.
Yep.
It is to... Who scores the penalty? I actually don't know.
There you go.
Of course,
she gets a brace.
Martins.
Yes.
Martins gets a brace.
Had come in for lots of scrutiny for not scoring.
Yeah.
Now has scored 2.
Oh, doesn't she do the... she sort of shakes like she's going left and then goes right instead.
She plays a little head game,
Yeah, she doesn't even read the keeper. I don't think she reacts to the keeper going. I think she just is so confident that her shape will fake out the keeper that she knows what she's doing.
And it does, because she's
like... It's like doing the Rapinoe thing of knowing what you... Pick a spot and know where you're going, but you just add a bit of misdirection into it, but you never deviate from the path.
She basically shapes like she's going to do exactly what Megan Rapinoe did, which is hit it with laces back across her body into like the left side netting, and then instead of the very last minute, just opens up and passes it to the right side. Goalkeeper bites on the shape, dives the other way, and the Dutch get the win.
2-1 Netherlands. They go through to the quarterfinal where they will face Italy. I think that's a really exciting game. That'll be exciting to watch. There's one just like Dutch tactical note I'd like us to briefly discuss, just because we noticed it during this game, and I think it'll be a thing to watch going forward. And it's Danielle van der Donk when the Dutch are defending. So she is... we talk about pressing triggers a lot, right? Like often like the team will start to press when the opposition passes to the goalkeeper or the opposition defender takes a slightly rough touch backwards, and then you know that it's time to go. I think from what we saw with the Dutch, the pressing trigger is when Danielle van der Donk decides it's time to press. She's a one-woman sort of pressing trigger and leader of the entire operation.
Yeah, I mean, the problem there, though, is that on multiple occasions she decided and sprinted 20 yards. But then that requires everybody else to sort of be very aware of what she's doing. And so
it's not simultaneous. Right? Maybe it's better to have a trigger that everyone can see and react to at the same time.
I think it definitely is.
Rather than one person getting a head start.
Yeah, because even there's one moment in the first half when she does it and then the ball goes wide and then Shanice van de Sanden is sort of like, oh, we're doing okay, I'll try. And then tries to get there. But just because she's reacting as opposed to doing it automatically, it buys a little bit of time for Japan.
Okay, so I agree that maybe it's not ideal, but it is interesting because it's just a thing we don't see a lot. Often you don't put that much responsibility on one creative player to have that much role in the defensive press.
There we are.
So I consider that noted.
All right. I'm glad you do.
So there's no Women's World Cup tomorrow. It's just off until Thursday when the quarterfinals start. It's just weird to have a break in the tournament. But there is Gold Cup.
There is.
The USA will be playing Panama in the Gold Cup Wednesday night. We will be recording one more show today and putting it out in the feed, our USA versus Panama preview, where we also plan to talk, I'm going to use the code word, glass door. You either know what that means or you don't. By the end of the show, you will know. We'll close this up by saying, Taylor Rockwell over there, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you for listening, and we will talk to you again soon.